My name is Alacia Black Hackett. It was Alacia Black at Western, but Alacia Black Hackett. I'm from Florence, South Carolina, and I majored in sociology with a minor in race, ethnicity, and gender. And then I received my master's at Western Carolina as well, my master's of public affairs with a concentration in organization development. I fell in love with the campus. I thought it was small enough, it was beautiful. And so I decided instead of going to a school that I was accepted in already, I was like, well, I'll apply for Western. And so just that experience with the Upward Bound Math and Science program, it was Dan Perlmutter, was the director at the time. And that actually took me the path of Western Carolina University. First of all, it was a culture shock, like literally for a black woman coming from South Carolina. But it was really a culture shock. There was not a lot of diversity at the time, but we created this family there with the students of color. When I was there, they had a program, and I'm not sure if it's still there, called Project CARE, committed to African American retention and education. And I remember that, like it was embedded. So I was part of that program. Then I became a mentor. It really was just that embracing of the students to really ensure that we felt like we were part of, just the sense of belonging. But I was very involved. Of course, you saw my AKA sign. I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And the Kappa Alpha chapter is where I had my origin. And then I was also part of OES, which was the Organization of Ebony Students. I directed the Western Carolina Inspiration Choir for 3.5 years of my time at Western. So that was also really, I was very involved in that. We did spring break tours. I mean, we just had a lot of fun. And so it was just, again, you found your place. They've knocked on Dawson Cafeteria, but there was just the bricks that we all kind of hung out at. And just, it was a small campus. It was small classrooms, and I didn't feel like a number. I really felt like, they knew my names when they did. The professors would call you. We had actually phones in our rooms at the time, so they would actually call. So that's pretty much what I did. I spent my time kind of just surrounded by the students who I drew to that looked like me. So initially, I did not even know what sociology was. I started out at Western as a biology education, I think. And then I had that meeting with Dr. Tony Hickey, I think that's his name. But sociology for me is just the study of how society has evolved. Of course, conflict doesn't happen until we say that there's a problem. And so the way I even look at life and just the way I carry myself in my position really is looking at the societal norms, the abnormalities, things that are skewed in our society, deviant behaviors. It helps me along the way. And I didn't know this then, right? But it really allows me to have that solid foundation to understand strategies that could work, strategies that may be a little bit more difficult, but society evolves. And I think that's the bedrock of what I was able to get in sociology. After my undergraduate degree, I knew I wanted to get a master's degree, but I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. And one day I was at a career fair, and the MPA had a table. And so they were really recruiting for students to be part of the program. Once I found out the classes, the whole program was at the time at the UNC Asheville campus. I had already planned to move to Asheville from Cullowhee. And I was like, well, this makes sense because, it's on the campus of UNC Asheville. I don't have to go back and forth. But I also had an interest in just kind of government. So the Masters of Public Affairs started as a convenience, but I actually really did fall in love with just, understanding, local government and organization development. The thing that really pushed me over the edge with my Juris Doctorate, which I received from Concord Law School, it's actually an executive Juris Doctorate, because I did not want to take the bar. So it's a Juris Doctorate. I had a family member who was just as involved. And I couldn't understand how this person was dealing with the justice system and they were innocent and actually spent time in prison. And I really went to law school because I wanted to understand. I wanted to be able to interpret the words on the page And if I could provide any type of assistance to someone who may, have a family member who cannot afford the retainment fee for an attorney, well, maybe we can look at it and figure it out together. So that's really what pushed me. So yes, I finished that in June of 2019, and I'm excited. It really allowed me to see life in a different way. It really gave me a perspective that I never considered. And so it's just all kind of meshing in and working right now. So when I was in my graduate program, I had an opportunity to do an internship at UNC Asheville in their multicultural affairs office. And it was it was kind of me doing an extension of what I did as a student because I was very involved. I benefited from work study, those kind of things. So I was in the office and I was able to help build programs. And so it was just kind of a natural thing. Once I started, the university track, it became like, okay, maybe I like this. And then I was asked to go over to Asheville Buncombe Technical Community College, where I was the director of student support, student development. It had the flexibility that I need as a mom who was a professional. And so I spent a lot of times. One thing that my resume doesn't say about me, when LinkedIn doesn't say, is every position that I've ever had in my career were inaugural positions. And what got me into the career path of diversity, equity, inclusion, I actually didn't want to do it because I thought it would pigeonhole me into just one area. But I noticed some discrepancies with how students of color are treated. And I remember, especially in places that are not as diverse as Cullowhee or Asheville. And I began to kind of take on the responsibility of helping to push, DEIA in those spaces. And so it just evolved and evolved and evolved. And so it was really important for me to advance that work. These are my opinions. Mm-hmm. I'm not speaking on behalf of the federal government. Mm-hmm. So history has shown us that from the genesis of the United States of America, it's really been from the perspective of one demographic, right? And when I was in law school, I learned about the reasonable man test. When you really break that down to the common denominator, it's a reasonable white man. When you think about our founding fathers of the Constitution or the United States of America, there was only one group, one demographic in the room. And so their perspective was simply from a reasonable white man. Now we have this conglomerate of diversity in the United States of America. We have people who are disabled. We have Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, indigenous folks. We have those with various sexual orientations. And the reasonable test that was considered in the conception of the United States of America does not include everyone that exists today. So for me, it's really important. We should want to balance out the systems that have been put in place then to make sure that it's more inclusive now. It's an evolution. We've evolved as a country. And so these positions as diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility is an evolution. It is really assisting in strategies on how to ensure that we are bringing inclusivity into the workspaces, into our educational institutions, into wherever it is, the corporate world, to consider those who were not considered before. It is an opportunity to allow the American dream to be lived. Because if we are, for justice for all, or the home of the free, land of the brave, then it is our responsibility to make sure that we adopt a more inclusive look at the systems, because the systems were intentionally exclusive. The systems were discriminatory by nature. And now that we know better, we can do better. I used to say this a few years back. I want to strategize myself out of a job. Because if we're still dealing with, the need to be inclusive in, 10 years, I used to say 5, but I'm gonna say 10, just in case somebody else sees it. Like in 10 years, if we still have to, this struggle of balancing, creating fair systems, then I'm not doing a good job. I don't say that anymore, but I really believe that until we are in the place where the equity lens is part of our everyday conversation. It's not a special, a special honorable mention because somebody brought it up in a meeting. Then we have to consider the need for us to evolve in our systems.